Hello and welcome. Today I have something pretty cool to show you, something that's been lent to me. This is a Acme model, N.V.A. Silbron Class A Boosey and Co limited cornet, British throughout, made in the 1920s. As I mentioned, this cornet was loaned to me by a friend of mine, so thank you, Nick, it's most appreciated, and is a cornet that is steeped in his family history, something that has been handed down by a couple of generations, and so I really appreciate that he has lent this instrument for me to review. I mentioned the title of this instrument and the model name. It is quite a convoluted model, but all of those things that I mentioned are actually stamped onto the bell. So let's go through them. The N.V.A. that you may be able to see there stands for New Valve Action, something that Boosey and Co was working on and tried to fix some of the problems that were inherent in cornets of that age. And the Silbron model name, you'll see both Silbron and Solbron models in the Boosey and Co lineup. I believe that refers to the alloy of silver and bronze, I think, that they use to make the valves with. The valves themselves are fairly interesting, and I shall withdraw one to show it to you. And that the metal that they use, the material that's used, does look and feel different to what we would see from other instruments of the age. But the only other thing that is particularly noteworthy of the valves is the spring in them. The spring, we've got a center spring in the middle here, but instead of the spring being under compression when you push the valve down, the spring is actually fixed somewhere down here, so that when you pull the valve up, the spring actually expands. So the spring is under tension when you push the valve down. And that's pretty much the opposite to what we see. In fact, I don't think I've seen this in any other cornet that I have personally taken apart. So it is pretty interesting and something that I think is noteworthy, hence why I've mentioned it to you. The cornet itself has a number of other interesting features, including this Y-shaped water key. We've got one lever here that is attached to a leaf type spring. It's not one of your coiled springs, it's a leaf spring, and that actuates these two exits for the water valves. This particular design is something that we saw quite frequently for cornets of this age, and whilst you might think it looks really cool and surely is great and everything, it actually isn't, because for this to work properly, the corks on the covering these little ports here have to be exactly the same size. If one of them was slightly bigger than the other, then, and I'll put my finger here to sort of demonstrate what I'm talking about, then you would not have proper coverage of the other port. And that's the sort of problem that we have with this type of valve mechanism, and that's why we don't see it today, because quite simply it doesn't work as well as you would think at first glance. The second unique feature of this cornet, well, not particularly unique, but the second noteworthy feature of this cornet is this little rotary valve here. What you might be able to see is that this particular port here has B flat written on it, this one has A written on the tube just there, and there is a little arrow on this cap of the valve which points to either the B flat or the A. What that means is that by twisting this, we can change the pitch of the instrument so that it would play in either B flat or A. That's something that we don't really need these days, but back in the 1920s when this was made, and certainly before then, instruments commonly, brass instruments commonly played in the key of A. It was something that blended a little bit better with the other sorts of keyed instruments that you'd be expected to play with, and it wasn't sort of until a little bit later where B flat sort of completely overtook A as the standard. One of the things that you'll also notice with this instrument that is a byproduct of having this valve is that the lead pipe here is incredibly short. That's because you don't stick a mouthpiece in here. If you were to stick a mouthpiece on the end of it, it wouldn't fit because this is too big for one piece, but then you'd have the instrument right up into your face and you wouldn't be able to fit your face, you know, flush with the mouthpiece. So in order to have the mouthpiece at a proper distance from the valve casing, it comes with a number of different length shanks. In the case of this instrument, it has 3 lead pipes with it. Firstly, we've got this little small one that has got sharp stamped across the top of it. We've got this slightly longer one which has got nothing stamped across the top of it, and then we've got this very long one here which has IP and then a circle, or an oval rather, stamped on the top of that up the top, there. I believe the IP stands for international pitch, which is referring to one of the frequencies that some musical groups used to be tuned to. Now, I mentioned earlier that this instrument is very special, and what makes it special is a number of the other accessories that come in the case. First of all, we have got a whole bunch of different letters and documents that refer to various elements of the instrument's history. So this belonged to, I believe, my friend's grandfather, or might have been great-grandfather. It was sent back to the UK in 1979 to be replated, and it was sent back in 1980, and all of that documentation, including the price, £65, is included in these letters, which I'm not going to show on camera just for privacy reasons. The Cornet case also has this in it, which is a lovely cleaning rod. You would shove a rag through this slot here, and you've got this nice wooden grip that you can use to push that rag through the valves of the instrument. 2 more things I want to show you about the case and the accessories. We've got these things inside this little container. They're quite hard and I have absolutely no idea what they're for. So if anyone can tell me what these are and what they're for, please let me know. As you can hear, they're quite hard. But the thing that interests me the most about the instrument is these 2 little wooden, I think balsa or some form of cork, very light wood casings here. This one sort of had half of its label taken off, but this one is complete. So this is the one that I will show you, and it's got a number of different things here written on it, as you may be able to see. And this says one set of, well, firstly it says Boosey and Co, 295 Regent Street, 1 set of springs for biped suspended valve action, patent 193729, with some instructions on how to replace this. Manufacturer Stanhope Place, Hyde Park, W2. So what this is, as you can probably tell, is a set of replacement springs for the valves. And unlike other springs that you'll see for Cornets, because these springs are kept in their standard place and are under tension instead of under compression when the valves are depressed, they are much smaller than what we would see from normal valves. But it's just fantastic. I've never seen valves, I've never seen springs for a Cornet such as this in the original packaging from the 1920s. Judging by some of the residue on here, I suspect this was originally wax sealed, but I've got really no idea for that. One of the common problems that you often see with instruments of this age is that the valves do not form a proper seal with the outer valve casing. So what that can result in is that when you put air through the instrument, instead of it being perfectly directed throughout the instrument and through the valves and everything like that, instead you can find that some of the air leaks and goes out extra places instead of going through the instrument as it's possible. And these leaks happen within the valve casing. The problem that that gives is that it can result in very, very indescript or inaccurate tuning and just notes that wobble all over the place. Thankfully though, there is a way that we can sort of temporarily at least rectify that. I've often mentioned a particular sort of valve oil that I use, and this is the Monster valve oil. It's the smoother variety, and this valve oil was recommended to me as a way of fixing some of the air leaks that you can get with these older instruments. So what I shall do is put this particular valve oil on the valves and see how we get on. Now that I've applied the Monster valve oil, let's see what this instrument now sounds like. It makes a dramatic difference, as you will hopefully be able to hear. Unfortunately though, that valve oil is just a temporary fix. Once the valve oil starts to leak out the instrument and wear off, you're going to lose the effect and it's going to be back to how it was. It's a bit of a shame, but it is, if you've got instruments that have historical significance and you only really want to play them every now and again, then something like that valve oil is a useful tool to have. That being said, it is a lot more expensive than normal valve oil. It only lasts a relatively short period of time before the instrument goes back to where it was, so there are those considerations for it. When it comes time to actually play this instrument, it is quite difficult. I don't know exactly why, but this instrument has a whole lot more resistance than pretty much any other cornet that I have tried to play. Certainly any other decent model of the time cornet that I've tried to play. Different lead pipes, different shanks affect the feel of the instrument quite dramatically. If I use the shorter shank, it is slightly easier to play than when I use the really long shank, and it could be because of all the air leaks with around in the valves, or it could be the extra resistance because of this tuning mechanism here, or a combination of the whole lot. I don't know why, but this instrument is, I don't know exactly why, but this instrument is very hard to play. Furthermore, it projects exceptionally poorly. This is not a cornet that you could go into any modern band with and try to play. Even though you might be able to get a configuration working where it is in tune, the resistance that you have throughout the instrument and the lack of projection means that no matter how hard you play, it's very difficult to try and get a nice, clear, projecting sound throughout the instrument. It also doesn't have a pinky ring up here. I don't know whether it ever used to have one and it's just been removed at some point. I don't think that's the case though, because there isn't a huge amount of space here to mount it on. But the fact that it doesn't have that pinky ring means that you don't have the ability to sort of ground your fingers by having that as a point of anchorage. So your fingers just tend to sort of wobble around. That can create a lot of stress on the rest of your fingers if you're not used to that. All in all, what we have here is a fantastic family heirloom, and I'm absolutely honoured that this friend of mine, again thanks Nick, has lent this to me so I can show you all the features of this instrument. To finish this video, I will play a little bit more out of the piece Napoli. Thank you very much for watching.